The breaking point Diplomat's mission James. Mitchell adjusted his formal jacket as his shuttle descended through the purple clouds of Vraxis Prime. He was 47 years old, with sandy brown hair starting to show silver at the temples. His blue eyes held the calm confidence of someone who had spent 20 years negotiating with beings from across the stars. James had been chosen as Earth's chief diplomat because he understood something important. Words could build bridges between worlds, and patience could turn enemies into friends. Today, he carried humanity's greatest hope in a simple datapad. The document contained terms for the Interstellar Commerce Agreement, a treaty that would open trade routes between human colonies and the Vraxian Empire. For 3 years, James had worked on this agreement, traveling back and forth between Earth and Vraxian space. He had learned their language, studied their customs, and earned the respect of several Vraxian trade officials. The treaty was finally ready for signing. The Vraxian Empire. The Vraxians were an old civilization that had ruled their corner of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. They were tall beings, standing nearly 8 feet high, with scales that shimmered in shades of green and gold. Their faces were angular with sharp features, and eyes that glowed amber in the dark. They had 4 arms, which they used with elegant precision in everything from art to warfare. The Vraxians believed in something they called the natural order. According to their philosophy, species were ranked by their age and technological advancement. Older civilizations naturally deserved more respect and authority than younger ones. Humans had only been traveling between stars for 70 years, which made them infants in Vraxian eyes. Many Vraxians viewed humans as useful for basic labor and simple trade, but nothing more. They could not imagine treating humans as equals. The very idea offended their sense of how the universe should work. The summit begins. The shuttle landed at the Grand Palace of Vraxis Prime, a massive structure built from crystalline materials that caught the light of 3 suns. James stepped out onto the landing platform and was greeted by his assistant, Maria Santos. Maria was 32 years old, with dark hair and sharp brown eyes. She had been working with James for 5 years and had become an expert on Vraxian culture. Together, they walked through corridors lined with statues of ancient Vraxian emperors. Each statue was carved from a single piece of jade and stood twice as tall as a human. The sculptures were meant to remind visitors of Vraxian power and permanence. The summit hall was circular with a domed ceiling that showed a map of the galaxy. Hundreds of delegates from different Vraxian provinces filled the seats. At the center of the room sat High Chancellor Zaxith, the leader of the Vraxian Empire. Zaxith was ancient, even by Vraxian standards, his scales dulled to a pale gray with age. James and Maria took their places at a small table designated for the human delegation. There were only 3 humans present compared to hundreds of Vraxians. James had grown used to being outnumbered at these meetings. What mattered was not the size of the delegation, but the strength of the arguments. The presentation, when James stood to speak, the room fell silent. He walked to the center platform, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He activated his datapad and began his presentation. The holographic display showed trade routes, economic projections, and cultural exchange programs. James spoke in perfect Vraxian, explaining how the treaty would benefit both civilizations. He talked about human manufacturing capabilities, scientific innovations, and agricultural techniques. He explained how humans could help the Vraxian Empire expand its economy while learning from Vraxian wisdom and experience. For 40 minutes, James presented his case with clarity and passion. He addressed every concern that Vraxian officials had raised during previous negotiations. He offered compromises on disputed points and highlighted areas of mutual interest. Most of the Vraxian delegates listened with what appeared to be genuine interest. Several of them nodded in agreement when James made particularly strong points. Even High Chancellor Zaxith seemed to be paying close attention. his amber eyes fixed on the human diplomat. At the moment of betrayal, James finished his presentation and bowed respectfully to the assembled delegates. He returned to his table, where Maria smiled at him with pride. They had done everything right. The treaty should be approved within the hour. But then something unexpected happened. A group of Vraxian military officers stood up from seats scattered throughout the hall. They moved with coordinated precision, forming a circle around the center platform. James felt a spike of alarm. This was not part of the planned ceremony. He started to stand, but Maria grabbed his arm with a look of fear on her face. The lead officer, a massive Vraxian with battle scars across his scales, raised one of his forearms. In his hand was a weapon that humans had never seen before. It looked like a rod of twisted metal that pulsed with purple energy. The officer spoke in a loud voice that carried throughout the hall. He declared that the treaty was an insult to Vraxian dignity. He said that humans were trying to rise above their natural station in the Galactic Order. He proclaimed that this insult would be answered with blood. Before James could react, the officer pointed his weapon and fired. The energy bolt struck James in the chest with tremendous force. He was thrown backward, crashing into the table. Maria screamed and tried to reach him, but other Vraxian guards held her back. The assassination James lay on the cold marble floor, feeling warmth spread across his chest. He knew immediately that the wound was fatal. The weapon had burned through his protective vest and torn apart his internal organs. He could hear chaos erupting around him. Other human staff members were shouting. Some Vraxian delegates were protesting the attack, while others remained silent. Maria broke free from the guards and dropped to her knees beside James. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to stop the bleeding with her hands. James looked up at her and tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. He wanted to tell her to get the other humans to safety. He wanted to tell her that this was not her fault. He wanted to tell her to warn Earth that the treaty had failed. But he could not form the words. His vision began to fade at the edges, darkness creeping in like a tide. The last thing James Mitchell saw was Maria's face above him, and the ancient domed ceiling beyond her with its map of the galaxy. He thought about his wife, Catherine, back on Earth. He thought about his son, Robert, who was serving as an engineer on a colony ship. He thought about all the humans scattered across hundreds of worlds, trying to build a future among the stars. Then James Mitchell, Earth's chief diplomat and a man who had dedicated his life to peace, died on the floor of an alien palace, murdered for daring to ask for equality. Earth's immediate response, asterisk. The assassination was broadcast live across Vraxian networks. The military officers who killed James wanted other species to see what happened to humans who did not accept their place. Within 3 hours, the footage reached Earth. It was the middle of the night in Geneva when President Thomas Wade received the emergency call. Thomas was 59 years old, with silver hair and gray eyes that had seen too many crises. He had been president for 6 years, guiding humanity through economic challenges and colonial disputes. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Thomas watched the assassination footage in his private office. He watched it 5 times, his expression never changing. His chief of staff stood nearby, waiting for orders. The silence stretched for several minutes. Finally, Thomas stood and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of Geneva sparkled peacefully in the darkness. He thought about all the human cities across Earth and throughout the colonies. He thought about the billions of people who trusted him to protect them and represent their interests. The Vraxians had just shown humanity exactly what they thought of human life. They had murdered a diplomat during a peace conference. They had broadcast the killing as a warning to keep humans in their assigned place. Asterisk. The declaration. Thomas turned from the window and activated his secure communication system. He entered a code that connected him directly to every human military commander in known space. His face appeared on screens in bases on Earth, Mars, Europa, Titan, and dozens of colony worlds. When Thomas spoke, his voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute certainty. He said one word that changed everything: war. That single word spread through human civilization like electricity through a wire. On Earth, military commanders who had been sleeping were jolted awake. On Mars, fleet admirals began pulling up strategic maps. On the outer colonies, defense coordinators started running combat simulations. Thomas followed his initial declaration with a longer message. He explained what had happened to James Mitchell. He told them that humanity would no longer accept being treated as an inferior species. He declared that the Vraxian Empire would learn what happened when they murdered human diplomats. Most importantly, Thomas invoked Protocol Omega. This was a contingency plan that had been developed 50 years earlier during humanity's first encounters with hostile aliens. Protocol Omega authorized the complete mobilization of human civilization for total war. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource in human space would be devoted to the war effort. The galaxy's mistake across the galaxy, other alien civilizations, watched humanity's reaction with curiosity and amusement. The Vraxian Empire had over 5,000 warships and controlled 200 star systems. Humanity had fewer than 600 warships and controlled only 40 systems. The math seemed simple to outside observers. This would be a short war that would teach humans their place. What the other species did not understand was that they were looking at the wrong numbers. They saw humanity's official military forces and assumed that represented human capability. They did not understand human history or human nature. Humans were the only species in the galaxy that had developed interstellar travel while still fighting wars on their homeworld. Every other civilization had evolved beyond large-scale warfare before reaching the stars. They fought when necessary, but war was rare and followed strict rules of engagement. Humans were different. Humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare. They had developed weapons and tactics for every possible scenario. They had learned to turn their entire civilization into a weapon when threatened. For 70 years, humans had been peaceful traders and polite diplomats because they chose to be. They had been showing the galaxy their gentle side, hiding their true capabilities. The assassination of James Mitchell had just removed that mask. The galaxy was about to discover what humans were really like when they stopped being polite. Asterisk, the storm UNLE 66 months of transformation 6 months after James Mitchell's death. Human civilization had transformed beyond recognition. Every aspect of human society had been reorganized for a single purpose: victory. On Earth, cities that had been centers of art and culture became centers of military production. The factories of Shanghai worked day and night producing armor plating for warships. The automated facilities of Lagos churned out millions of rounds of ammunition every hour. The engineering centers of Berlin designed new weapon systems that combined human creativity with alien technology captured from previous conflicts. Mars had become humanity's primary shipyard. The red planet's lower gravity made it perfect for constructing large vessels. New construction facilities were built across the Martian surface, connected by underground tunnels and surface railways. Ships that would have taken years to build under normal circumstances were now completed in weeks, using modular construction techniques. The asteroid belt became humanity's mine and forge. Massive mining vessels tore apart asteroids to extract iron, titanium, and rare metals. Mobile refineries processed the raw materials into components that were shipped to shipyards throughout human space. Some asteroids were hollowed out and converted into mobile fortresses, their industrial equipment turned into devastating weapons. Captain Rachel Stone stood on the bridge of the HSS Thunderstrike, watching data streams flow across multiple displays. Rachel was 36 years old, with black hair cut military short and green eyes that seemed to glow with intensity. She had joined the Colonial Navy at 18 and spent the last 18 years learning every aspect of space warfare. Rachel had been born on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, in a research colony beneath kilometers of ice. She had grown up looking at the stars through observation domes, dreaming of the day she would travel between them. Her parents had been scientists studying extremophile life forms in Europa's subsurface ocean. They had taught Rachel to be curious, patient, and systematic in her thinking. The Thunderstrike was an Archer-class destroyer, one of the new vessels built specifically for this war. It was smaller than traditional battleships, but faster and more maneuverable. The ship bristled with missile launchers, railguns, and point defense systems. Most importantly, it carried humanity's newest weapon, quantum torpedoes. These weapons used controlled quantum detonations to tear apart enemy shields and armor. They were based on theoretical physics that humans had developed, but never tested in combat. The Vraxians had no defense against them because they did not believe such weapons were possible. The first strike, Rachel commanded a task force of 30 ships heading toward the Vraxian system of Kelthera. Intelligence reports indicated that Kelthera was a major military staging area with shipyards, weapons factories, and a fleet of 200 Vraxian warships. The human fleet had been traveling through hyperspace for 3 days. During that time, Rachel had drilled her crew constantly on combat procedures. She knew that most of her personnel had never seen real battle. They needed to be ready for the shock and chaos of warfare. As the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kelthera system, Rachel's tactical officer called out contacts. 217 Vraxian vessels were detected, exactly matching the intelligence estimates. The Vraxian ships were massive compared to human vessels. Their flagship alone was 3 times larger than Rachel's entire task force combined. But Rachel was not intimidated by size. She had studied Vraxian tactics extensively and knew their weaknesses. Vraxian warfare was based on ancient traditions. They formed their fleets into geometric patterns that looked impressive but were predictable. They broadcast challenges before attacking, giving enemies time to prepare. They believed that honor in combat was more important than victory through deception. Humanity's new rules, Rachel had no intention of fighting by Vraxian rules. She divided her task force into 6 groups of 5 ships each. Each group received specific targeting assignments and attack vectors. The Vraxians detected the human fleet and began forming their traditional battle formation. Their flagship broadcast a formal challenge in 3 languages, demanding that the human commander identify themselves and state their intentions. Rachel ignored the challenge completely. Instead, she gave a simple order to her fleet: execute pattern, chaos. The 6 human groups accelerated toward the Vraxian formation from different angles. They moved at speeds that seemed reckless, pushing their engines beyond normal safety limits. The Vraxians adjusted their formation to meet what they assumed would be a conventional attack. But the human ships did not slow down or form up for a broadside exchange. Instead, they dove straight into the Vraxian formation, breaking it apart from the inside. Rachel's group targeted the flagship, their quantum torpedoes launching while still at extreme range. The Vraxian shields, designed to stop conventional energy weapons, offered no protection against the quantum warheads. The torpedoes phased through the shields and detonated inside the flagship's hull. Massive explosions tore through the vessel's interior. Within seconds, the pride of the Vraxian fleet was a burning wreck. Chaos and confusion. The other human groups executed similar attacks throughout the Vraxian formation. They did not try to destroy every enemy ship. Instead, they targeted command vessels, communication relays, and formation anchor points. The goal was not to win through superior firepower, but to create chaos and confusion. Vraxian captains found themselves unable to communicate with their commanders. Ships that tried to maintain formation discovered their anchor vessels were destroyed or disabled. Individual captains had to make decisions on their own, something their rigid military culture had not prepared them for. Human ships darted through the confusion like sharks through a school of fish. They would fire, accelerate away, change vectors, and fire again from a different angle. They used the debris from destroyed Vraxian ships as cover. They predicted Vraxian movements and positioned themselves to attack from blind spots. Rachel watched the battle unfold on her displays with satisfaction. Her crew worked with efficient precision, each person performing their role perfectly. The months of drilling had paid off. Her communications officer called out that several Vraxian ships were attempting to retreat toward the planet. Rachel gave permission to let them go. She wanted survivors to carry the message back to the Vraxian Empire about what had happened here. The cost of victory, the battle, lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 193 Vraxian warships had been destroyed or disabled. 24 escaped to the planet's surface. The human task force had lost 3 ships with 2 more heavily damaged. It was the most one-sided victory in the history of space warfare. Rachel ordered her fleet to withdraw to a safe distance. She transmitted her report back to Earth using quantum communication systems. The message would reach headquarters instantly, regardless of the distance. As her ship moved away from the debris field, Rachel looked at the destruction on her screens. Thousands of Vraxians had died in this battle. She felt no joy in the killing, but she felt no guilt either. They had started this war by murdering James Mitchell during a peace conference. Humanity was simply finishing it. Rachel thought about the diplomat she had never met. She had seen the footage of his assassination, like everyone else. She remembered his calm face as he presented his treaty, and the shock in his eyes when he was shot. James Mitchell had died trying to build peace. Rachel and thousands like her would ensure his death was not meaningless. The cascade effect news of the Battle of Kelthera spread across the galaxy within days. Other alien civilizations that had been watching the war with detached amusement suddenly paid close attention. The mathematics of the battle made no sense according to conventional military theory. A smaller force had destroyed a larger one with minimal losses. It should not have been possible. Military analysts from a dozen species studied the battle recordings. They noticed several things that disturbed them deeply. Human ships moved faster and more aggressively than any other species would dare. Human tactics showed no respect for traditional combat protocols. Human weapons used principles that most species considered too dangerous to weaponize. The Althari Collective, a coalition of scientific species, released a statement warning that humanity appeared to practice what they called unrestricted warfare. This meant humans would use any tactic and any weapon that gave them an advantage, regardless of traditions or conventions. The Dramuk clans, who prided themselves on their warrior culture, analyzed human tactics and found them disturbing. Humans did not seek honorable combat. They sought efficient destruction of enemy forces by any means necessary. The Vraxian response, High Chancellor. Zaxith convened an emergency council on Draxus Prime. The old Vraxian leader had expected a short war that would remind humans of their place. Instead, he was facing a military disaster. His advisors argued about how to respond. Some wanted to negotiate an immediate ceasefire. Others demanded that more forces be committed to crush the human rebellion. Zaxith listened to all the arguments before making his decision. The Vraxian Empire had never surrendered in 3,000 years of history. They would not start now, regardless of what it cost. He ordered the mobilization of the Vraxian reserve fleets. Over 2,000 additional warships would be pulled from garrison duties throughout the Empire and sent to fight humanity. Zaxith also sent messages to allied species, calling in ancient treaties and alliances. He promised trade concessions and territorial rights to any civilization that would join the war against humanity. Several species responded positively. The Krell Dominion committed 200 ships. The Sothis Federation sent 150 vessels. The Margath tribes offered 300 raider craft. Within weeks, the Vraxian Empire had assembled a combined fleet of over 3,000 warships. It was the largest military force gathered in the galaxy in over a century. Humanity's true. Nature revealed while the Vraxians gathered their forces. Humanity continued its transformation. The Battle of Kelthera had proven that human tactics worked. Now those tactics were refined and expanded. Human strategists developed new doctrines for space warfare. They studied every recorded battle in galactic history, looking for weaknesses in how other species fought. They created simulation programs that predicted enemy behavior based on cultural and psychological profiles. New weapons rolled out of human factories at an incredible rate. Plasma lances that could cut through Vraxian armor like paper. Electromagnetic pulse mines that could disable entire fleets. Stealth corvettes that could infiltrate enemy formations and gather intelligence. But the most important change was in human attitude. For 70 years, humans had been trying to fit into galactic civilization. They had been polite, accommodating, and eager to please. The assassination of James Mitchell had stripped away that veneer. Now the galaxy was seeing what humans were really like. They were a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars. They were descendants of predators who had hunted prey across continents. They were the children of warriors who had fought with spears and swords long before they reached for the stars. The message to the Jusa. Galaxy President Thomas Wade addressed the galactic community from Earth. His speech was broadcast on every major communication network throughout known space. Thomas spoke in calm, measured tones. He explained that humanity had not wanted this war. They had sought only peaceful trade and mutual respect. The Vraxian Empire had responded to that peaceful overture with murder. Thomas made it clear that humanity would not stop fighting until the Vraxian Empire apologized for James Mitchell's assassination, punished those responsible, and recognized humanity as an equal civilization. He also warned other species not to interfere. Any civilization that allied with the Vraxians would be considered an enemy of humanity. Any civilization that provided material support to the Vraxian war effort would face human retaliation. Thomas ended his speech with words that would be remembered for generations. He said that humanity had been willing to be the galaxy's friend. But if the galaxy insisted on making humanity an enemy, then the galaxy would learn what human enmity truly meant. The speech sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. Several species that had been considering alliance with the Vraxians quickly withdrew their offers. Others declared strict neutrality and closed their borders to all military traffic. The final confrontation approaches Captain Rachel Stone received new orders from Fleet Command. Her task force was being expanded to 100 ships and assigned to Strike Force designation Alpha 1. Their target was Vraxis Prime itself, the homeworld of the Vraxian Empire. The mission was simple in concept, but incredibly difficult in execution. They would attack the most heavily defended system in Vraxian space, destroy the military installations protecting the planet, and force the Vraxian government to surrender. Rachel knew this would be the decisive battle of the war. If humanity won, the Vraxian Empire would collapse. If humanity lost, the war would drag on for years. As her fleet prepared for the mission, Rachel thought again about James Mitchell. She had learned more about him in the months since his death. He had been a good man who believed in diplomacy and peaceful solutions. He had spent 3 years building a treaty that would have benefited both humans and Vraxians. His reward for that dedication had been assassination. Rachel promised herself that when this war ended, she would visit Earth and find James Mitchell's family. She would tell them that their husband and father had not died in vain. She would tell them that his death had awakened humanity to its true strength. She would tell them that the galaxy would never again underestimate what humans were capable of achieving. The fleet finished its preparations and entered hyperspace, heading toward Vraxis Prime and the final battle that would determine humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Asterisk.